All right. Another episode of DUCKit. Today we have Tarek. I've known you for, I don't know, now it's been like probably 2 years.
Yeah.
2 years. Tarek, the co-founder and CEO of Seez. Great to have you. I can't believe you're here. I mean, the Abu Dhabian who comes to Dubai after getting tested a million times is finally in my office.
I took 3 COVID tests to be here, so.
So you're COVID free, so we're all safe.
Yeah.
How's it going?
It's going well, actually. The year started off quite busy for us. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of things going on, but exciting, generally.
So, just a little disclaimer, we've worked together a little bit,
Yes.
but I do consider us friends now. I hope it's not a one-way kind of
No,
assumption.
for sure.
But,
3 COVID tests, man.
It's quite a commitment. And so I know a little bit about your business. I know a lot about your team. Fantastic. Love it. You've recently moved. You used to be just across the pond.
Yeah.
And by pure luck, the other day I was walking in DIFC. I was meeting with the Steak Boys, and I see this logo. I'm like, oh, I know that. Oh my God, they're here. I had never seen it before.
It's the new logo.
It's the new logo, and I was super happy to see it. And then I walk in, and I see Andrew, and I see Olga, and I see all these people, and I was like, wow, what are you guys doing here? So tell me a little bit about that. What's that about the move and all that?
Yeah, so we used to be based in Astrolabs, right across the street from you guys. And we got a license as a fintech to be the first automotive secure payment solution. So acting as an escrow provider for car payments.
Cool.
And part of that license with the DFSA was we needed to have presence in the DIFC. So we decided to move there. It's actually our first full-blown proper office in Dubai. So we're quite excited.
It feels like a graduation.
Yeah, I feel like,
awesome.
Get to the big campus now. Yeah.
That's cool. I was like super surprised to see that setup, but I actually think it's amazing. Like a part of me is like, okay, it's beautiful, and I think it's amazing. Like the food court, the facilities, the office, the location right next to the metro too. It's like it's super well done. But a part of me was also like, oh my God, it doesn't feel startup anymore. It feels like super like established, and so for me, I have mixed feelings. But then I'm like, look at where we are. We're in Dubai, right? So this is bound to happen. How is it kind of, if it has at all, how has it kind of changed your culture, your operations? Has it done anything?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I love the ecosystem there. Like I worked in the IFC prior to that for 8-9 years. So like it's nice to be back, and I always liked it there. The museums, the coffee shops, the restaurants, all of that. And I don't think we're missing out on the startup vibe just because literally everyone around us in that hive are startups, right? Yeah. So I don't think we were giving up much there. One thing I don't like about it is it's inside a mall effectively, right? Yeah. So there's no windows.
Oh,
so
it's true. There are no windows.
So you feel like it's a shop basically. So that's the only thing I miss. But they have a nice garden on the rooftop and all of that. So it's okay if you need a breather. In terms of culture, we're beginning to find out. We bought our first coffee machine. We asked people what kind of coffee machines they want. We bought our first video conferencing system. Nice. Every Thursday now, someone is bringing breakfast. Like something unique and funky. And
it's true because it's something you often forget, that a lot of culture is the byproduct of your environment and your space, and like kind of making it your own. But when you're an accelerator or an incubator, it's kind of hard to carve that culture out because you're kind of blended in with everybody else. Yeah,
you end up adapting the culture they want, right? So if they have, I don't know, Pizza Wednesday, then that becomes part of your culture. But it's actually the accelerator or incubator culture.
It's funny, I've never realized that till this point. Actually,
me too. I never thought about it. Yeah,
but essentially, it's difficult to build a culture of your own within a space that's being shared. Of course, that's absolutely natural.
Yeah, you don't even have your logo somewhere. So for us, it was actually nice to have our logo for the first time.
It's like an identity. You can now claim it. That's awesome. So Mabruk, that's amazing.
Yeah, thanks.
You guys are a few years into your business. I know there's been kind of changing kind of focus, strategy a little bit. How is that kind of, or has it had an impact on your mission and your vision of the business? And today, given the kind of almost pivot that you guys are doing, could you tell us a little bit about kind of how that's impacted?
Yeah,
your organization?
absolutely. So our mission generally, without like stating an actual mission statement, has always been, with your help actually, matching people with the right cars for them, right?
Yeah.
So, and initially we started off by aggregating all cars from all sites and really helping people to find those cars.
Yeah.
Then over time we introduced leasing as part of the offering that we have. And now I think, we a lot happened in 2020. So from business model wise, our business model was to a large extent data driven, where we sold data to dealerships and OEMs.
Hold on. Lauren, can you just Sorry, I think this is the first time we've ever been interrupted on a
Really?
podcast.
Wow, okay.
Sorry, but
Now
sorry,
you remember
we
it.
cut you up. So leasing, and then you were talking about OEMs.
Yeah. Shall I keep talking?
Yeah, keep going, man. I mean, this is normal.
All right. So yeah, we were giving data, and then when COVID hit, everybody paused all their marketing spend, and our data fell within that. So while at the same time, digitization and online car buying and all of that started booming, right? So I don't know if you've been following a few of the big global companies, but it's a company in the US called Carvana, for example. They're now valued at $52 billion. They're 7 years old, right? Ford Automotive was valued at 30 billion like a few months back. So they're almost double the size of Ford Automotive. You have Kazoo in the UK, which is the fastest unicorn in Europe and all that. So there's been a massive interest, at least, in online car buying. And when that came from the consumer side, it obviously pushed the dealers to want to also digitize themselves.
Yeah.
It happened that we were working on a few initiatives with the Dubai government to digitize registration over blockchain.
Yeah.
So we were building that for them. And we had our data systems, we had our car valuation. So it made sense for us to start shifting into that space. So what we did in 2020 is we shifted our focus a bit more towards SaaS, where we started providing these modules, if you want to call them, to dealerships and OEMs, while at the same time, thinking about the consumer at the end of it, like what are we offering as a marketplace and how will our marketplace side evolve? So right now our marketplace continues to be, we want to focus on higher quality cars, so coming from dealers. We want to offer new and used cars, and we want to offer buying and leasing in a digital journey. And when we talk about digital, a lot of people in car buying say online buying, but really it ends for them at putting a down payment on a car and then going to the showroom.
Yeah.
In our case, we want to actually have the full journey all the way down to registration and doing all of that digitally. So yeah, this is where we are. We use 2020 to pivot or refocus like that.
And so the pivot is really, if I were to kind of simplify that, the pivot is getting into high quality and new cars with online buying end to end.
Online buying or leasing end to end, correct?
Or leasing end to end, sorry. Yeah, so high quality and new cars, full end to end transaction for leasing or buying.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the main challenge from a, let's say, an inventory standpoint is being able to digitize dealers.
Correct.
And you're going to solve that solution.
Correct, because a lot of the modules that we have are going to be used by the dealers to digitize themselves, which now with COVID just jumped up on their priority list.
Absolutely.
So if we're already working with the dealers to digitize registration, digitize insurance or loan application, whatever, then when we're done, they're digitized and they would fit perfectly in our digital marketplace. So.
And so you're basically the Shopify of cars on one end.
Correct.
And then on the other end, you're like
a digital marketplace.
Digital marketplace.
Yeah. Which is actually an interesting thing because recently we saw Shopify go and acquire marketplaces. And we also saw Amazon going and acquiring Shopify competitors. So it seems there is an interesting,
That's cool.
mix between those two models.
That's amazing. And so today you're onboarding all the brands and they can customize, they can do whatever they want. So on one end, they have their customer facing solution. On the other end, They're plugged into your marketplace.
Correct. And within the digitization of the dealerships, we're focusing more on the actual products and modules versus building their websites and all of that. It's basically plug in this registration module, plug in this trade-in valuation module, plug in this insurance module.
I gotta say that's amazing. Like I know you know this, but I was shopping for a car from the second we met you guys, and we finally bought a car a couple months back.
Okay.
It basically took us a year to decide what we wanted to buy as a car. And it was extremely frustrating in the sense that you go to the dealers, you have to go to the dealers. Their online inventory does not reflect what they have today.
True.
So it's a big problem. And even when you go physically to the kind of dealers, the salesperson is not really aware of the full inventory anyway.
Yeah.
What's available, what's reserved, what's sold,
True.
what's coming in tomorrow, next week, et cetera, et cetera. So that whole inventory management system and being able to offer something that meets the requirements of the customers,
it's disconnected in a way.
It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And having to kind of displace yourself, and you know, in Dubai, there are clusters of dealers, right? There's one on Sheikh Zayed, then there's one in Festival City, then there's one I don't know where, but it's extremely inconvenient to kind of get around. And the shocker, so I bought a Volvo.
Okay. That's the shocker.
That's the shocker.
You're looking for a Porsche at some point.
Yeah, now we ended up with a Volvo. I was looking to replace my car with a Porsche, and instead we replaced Nadia's car, my wife's car, with a Volvo.
All right.
So, parenthood. So what was shocking is when we finally made a decision, we had made a different decision, went back to the dealer that we went back to Volvo, and by chance we went by just to make sure we had made the right decision before going to the other dealer. And I had been there the day before, and the day that I went, the next day I went, and they had a new car in inventory that they didn't tell me about.
Wow.
And it was exactly what we wanted, within the budget that we had, within all the requirements that we had. And by chance, I happened to walk in right before, on my way to the other dealer where I was going to go sign.
Okay.
So I was going to Land Rover to go sign, and passing by Volvo just to make sure with my wife, are we sure about this decision? Let's just go check it out. And we have this car. What, you didn't have this car yesterday? Oh yeah, we didn't know. We just got it. I'm like, how did you not know it was coming in the next day?
Yeah.
And that, I mean, it's a glaring issue that I think you guys will solve in terms of being able to.
I think you just gave me a really cool feature idea, actually. We didn't think about it, like having notifications for the car that you want when it comes in for the dealer. So yeah, we should add that. Thank you.
I'll take royalties. Cool. And I wanted to ask you, so, you know, startups are exhilarating. They're a lot of fun, but they're also extremely challenging. And, you know, a pivot is no easy feat for any business. And a change in strategy is a very difficult thing to do in an organization, right? It takes decision-making skills and maturity and kind of organizational kind of alignment to kind of get these things done. And it's often a big risk to the business. And, you know, COVID showed us that whatever you base your strategy on, forget it. And so I wanted to ask you, like, from your experience, having made these decisions and being able to pivot and see the opportunity to shift, what are the recommendations you would, you know, give people that are starting businesses or building businesses or scaling businesses when it comes to really having the courage to look outside what you've already promised to kind of your stakeholders? You know, how do you do that successfully? When is the right time to do that? And what are your learnings on being able to kind of turn a ship, if you have any? Because I find that extremely interesting, but extremely kind of challenging to do in any business, in any stage of the business.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely, it's very tricky. I mean, I don't think I have a magic formula for it, but for us, it's been really, you know, figuring out a bunch of questions, right? So one is, do we pivot or not?
Yeah.
Two, when do we pivot, and what do we pivot into? And then once that decision is made, which are all extremely not easy to make, because, you know, things change and you don't know whether you should keep at it with what you're doing and really, you know, like hammer through, or it's maybe better to step back and change direction, or in some cases, you know, new opportunities come about, and do you chase those new stuff? Do you abandon what you already had and change the new thing, or you just keep focusing on what you had? So really, it's a tricky question. But once you do, it's very difficult to, you know, formulate it in a way that, you know, has a clear direction, because it's still at an early stage within that pivot. Still an idea. And then you need to realign your team in a way so they understand and not feel like you're starting from scratch, you know, like basically that their previous work matters and is incorporated in this new vision.
Exactly. It can be extremely kind of frustrating,
Demotivating, yeah.
and demotivating.
And also very importantly is the investors, right? Like if you've raised money, like saying, hey, we raised money on this concept, now we're doing this, and this is why it relates and why this new thing is better, right? Hopefully, if it's a genuinely good pivot, you know, the story should sell itself. Like it should be obvious that it is a better thing. And then, yeah, you align all the stakeholders and you go after it. It does create a bit of, I think, tension or complexity when you're looking to raise another round.
Of course.
At that point in time, before you've proven the new pivot, and it's a new story, but you're also not a fresh startup, and you don't want to have a fresh startup valuation, right? So you want to have a higher valuation because you're learned so much, you have user base, you have a team, you have all of that. But then you've pivoted slightly in a new direction, which you still haven't proven yet. So
you want to give value to that effort already.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I find it, you know, given the circumstances and given the fact that I understand your industry and your business a little bit, I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. I'm totally convinced that you guys are making the right decision. I can't wait to see what it looks like and how it kind of rolls out into the market. I think it's definitely, and it's definitely a good problem to solve in the region, but I don't think it's a regional problem either. I think it's a global problem, right? I think it's
yeah, we're actually like I'm glad you mentioned it. First of all, I'll have you on record. I'll take that to the investors saying it's Chris recommended this. But yeah, definitely we're actually doing a lot of work in Europe now. So we have a few projects going on there along the same type of strategy. So awesome. Yeah, it's something we started on like second half of last year, and right now we're getting some decent traction in Europe.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah,
and from your kind of your journey has been kind of a super interesting one. You've raised quite a bit of money. You've built a pretty strong team. You've kind of weathered some challenging economies that we went through, etc. I kind of wanted to ask you kind of two things. Number one, what has been the most kind of difficult learning so far for you?
Yeah.
And then obviously the flip side to that is what has been the most kind of pleasant or kind of surprising kind of learning so far?
I don't know if you got a pleasant learning. It's always usually, you know, like you're in the mud, then you learn something and you get out of it. Couple of learnings. I mean, one, I learned that, you know, the importance of, everybody says have a good team and all that, and it's important, but you know, it's on paper until you really feel the difference between a good team and a less good team. It's really key. Two, I learned always raise more money than you think you need. There are two camps to that. A lot of people say, yeah, do that. And other people say, no, don't overdilute yourself too early and wait till later you get a higher valuation and all that.
So I understand the dilution one. Yeah. But why would you raise more than what you need from your experience?
Because often stuff, like not often, almost 100% of that stuff are not going to go as planned. Yeah. They're going to take longer. They're going to be more expensive. So for us, for example, in our last round, we wanted to raise $3 million. And there was some decent interest, so we got, it was 5 times oversubscribed, so we got $15 million of checks like for that round. And then I had to decide, do we take 3 million and then run with it, or do we take more? We ended up taking 6 million in our last round, which closed in February 2020. And then in March, COVID hit, and I'm like, thank God we raised 6 million, right? Like, so yeah, you dilute yourself a bit. I think a lot of founders, especially at the earlier stage, get way too hung up on valuation. And really, if you run the math, you know, you're selling 10, 20% of your business. By that time, maybe you own half of it. And then, so it's 10%. And then if you reduce the valuation by 10%, you know, you're losing 1% extra for a few $1 million more. Yeah, it's worth it. You know, like it's worth it. If you run the math, it's usually worth it. So yeah, I definitely think you should raise more money than you need, because it's never fun raising money. It's never easy raising money. Even when you're 5 times oversubscribed, it was horrible for us. So take more money. It gives you more runway. It gives you more leeway to pivot, focus, do stuff like that. And I don't think you'll regret it.
And to go back to the other point that you made, you said, building the right team is everything. And your learning is that, yes, it is absolutely critical to your success. Could you say more about that and what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, one thing, for example, you hear it a lot from the YC guys, for example, Y Combinator, have a co-founder. They usually don't fund startups with one guy and whatever. So in our case, I'm fairly older than my co-founder, so I thought from an experience, it didn't matter as much as I would have thought. But it does, it does, especially when things aren't going well and you need, a bouncing board, or you need someone to say, screw it, it's going to be okay, let's push through that. Like, even psychologically, it's important. So that was a key thing. And then, don't go cheap. Every startup doesn't have as much money as they'd like to have.
Sure.
And then they try to save, a few $1,000s here and there on a salary, and they go for a tier 2 or 3 guy. Like, top guys will more than pay for themselves over time, and it's worth it. It feels, too much when you're making that offer. But these people usually, are more expensive for a reason, and it'll pay back. And especially when you start, startups typically don't build their middle management fast. Maybe they hire a CTO and a CEO early on. But then over time, you just need to start building, getting a chief marketing officer, chief operations officer, and all that. So as you start building that middle management, go for tier 1 people if you have the option.
Totally agree. I mean, we're in the business of advice over here, so we've seen kind of these problems in a lot of organizations. But what's the kind of, so I think cost is definitely one thing. I think it's one thing that hinders the ability or the kind of acceptance to kind of hire the right talent. But there's also like a it's cultural or it's a leadership style. I don't know what it is. It's a reoccurring theme that we see in every organization. We have generally good top talent and in leadership. You have generally pretty solid execution, but in the middle, startups that are, I would say, anywhere between 3 to 6 years old tend to have a huge gap in their middle management. I think it's across the board. Every company that we kind of do business with has the same problem.
I think I asked you a few times, when we were building our team, do you know anyone in that middle? How can we get them? Yeah.
And it's a reoccurring issue. And I don't know if it's a startup disease, if it's a Middle Eastern thing, or if it's, our leaders in the region are not good at building their leadership. I don't know if it's an experience thing, but it's definitely like a reoccurring theme across the board. Or maybe it's a talent gap, right? Maybe we have super experienced people who have graduated to become leaders, and we have good execution, but we have nothing in the middle that's filling in, right?
Yeah. So that's interesting. I think there might be an angle of just like an evolution of the market, in terms of, because this whole VC and startup is just very, very nascent still here. So you have the people who did it and now graduated and
now building,
like you, the ex-Kareems and the people who exited and now doing their own stuff. And then you have the fresh people coming in because it's exciting, and that middle gap is usually missing. I think, now with the whole world opening up and people moving more, but also the whole work remotely, it opens up the world for what you need, right? I think the issue comes then when you do find those people is how do you incentivize them, right? Because you can't afford to pay them the salaries they were making at Google and Facebook or whatever. And at the same time, if you're like a Series A, B startup, you can't afford to even give them a lot of shares because you already have given a lot of the shares previously and you're mature. And you're not so mature that if you give them 0.05%, they're still happy with it, right? So you're at a place where you don't have a lot of equity to give out and you can't pay massive salaries, but you need those people that need at least one of the two, right? So then it becomes a question of how do you convince them with a mix of the two, plus some culture, plus some vision of what you're building and all of that. And it's not a standard formula, but you gotta find the person where your mix of all these 4 or 5 things, culture, story, some equity, some salary, adds up to an interesting enough package for them to pick you over another startup or over Google or Facebook or whatever.
No, 100%. And on that point, I want to get your kind of view on one more thing on the talent front. I agree with you. I think finding the right mix to kind of incentivize and compensate and encourage people to join your team is, I think it's case by case, but it's one of the biggest challenges I think that most leaders have in the region. Building their team is extremely difficult. But I wanted to ask you because in the Middle East generally, we have, I wouldn't say a skill problem. I would say we have a character problem, from my experience, if I may say that, right? I often don't have roadblocks when it comes to finding someone that has the capability technically to do what I'm looking to do, right? A developer, an engineer, a designer, a copywriter, whatever it is I'm looking for. I can generally access someone in the region that has that technical skill. The roadblock I always hit, whether I'm building my own organization and hiring people or working with freelancers or external resources, is the character and the personality. I find that in the region, one thing that we have not been able to do, and honestly, I credit this to the organizations that have been able to do it, like at Karim, for example. I think we figured out a culture to be able to kind of get everyone rallied and really put in that effort and kind of align from an ownership standpoint. But generally, it's not omnipresent. Like perseverance, work ethic, character, strength, ownership is something that discipline generally does not exist.
Yeah.
Across the board. You'll find people that have talent that can give you, moments of amazing work, but you can't find it consistent.
Yeah.
And it leads me to kind of reflect a little bit. And I guess with maybe a bit of maturity, if I have any at this point in life, but I think I have a little bit.
Buying a Volvo, man.
I bought a Volvo. I'm pretty mature now. But it kind of leads me to want to understand what is it about this region? Is it that we're an emerging market? We don't have enough experience yet? Does that discipline come only with time? Does it, and it's extremely difficult to find. Discipline for me in the region is should be what everyone is talking about.
Yeah.
And nobody's talking about it. It's all about, the talent does not exist. And I don't agree with that. I think we have the talent. I just don't think that we have the character and the discipline.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's something we think a lot about because probably 70% of our team are remote, right? So discipline becomes insanely important when it's remote because you don't want to be paying a guy, twirling his thumbs all day in Denmark, right? So I mean, what we found is on the tech side, we've been pretty lucky in finding disciplined people. I think, I don't know how to say this, but some countries lend themselves to higher discipline than others.
Yeah.
Right? Like we found that people, in the Nordics, for example, and other places are just used to that.
It's cultural almost.
Culturally. Which brings me to the second point of your point. I think culturally, there is less discipline in the Middle East. I mean, and it's with everything, right? It's basically, it's common for people to be late to meetings. There's a lot of inshallahs in the world and all of that, right? So I think there's definitely a cultural element to it. But what we felt served us well is what's even more important than discipline. It sort of factors discipline into it, but what if I have to pick one between the two, between discipline and this other one, I would pick the other one, is actual ownership. So people who feel ownership in the company, even if they're not disciplined, they'll figure out a way to add value at their own time, at their approach. Exactly, right? And I think that's the core missing thing, having people that feel ownership. Because once you have that, that's it. The guy acts or girl acts like it's their business, and that's the best you can hope for, right? And from there, everything else comes. Maybe they're not disciplined, but they'll put in the hours later. They'll find an easier way to do it, and all of that, and then you'll get the results. And
so then, how do you scale ownership?
Oh man, I don't know. I'll tell you, in our company, for example, two of the people that have some of the highest ownership at Seez are are people we didn't have a role for. There were people who came and like, yeah, we want to work here. And one of the guys like sent us a PowerPoint presentation about what he'd like to do with Seez, and I barely read the first version. And then he sent another presentation and a third presentation. I'm like, man, let's just hire the guy, right? And there was nothing for him to do. Like we were thinking, okay, what does he work on now? And turns out he's the biggest ownership guy in the the whole company at some point. And yeah, so I don't think you can measure it at the recruitment level.
And it's amazing because it sounds like the conclusion to this conversation is then don't hire
For the
talent,
skills.
hire
People.
hire character.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's a very difficult thing to do in a startup because you're solving a specific problem that you've
And you have a
identified.
need, and you need
You're
someone.
like, oh, I need to fix this problem which needs this skill, and I need to fix this problem which needs this skill. So you really look at skills.
But then I think 100%. I think you need to also keep an open mind and keep like, ad hoc pool of money to hire people for character. And our experience, we're only a team of like 38. It's not like we've tried it out with 1,000 people. But our experience are the times where we hired for character. It was the biggest payoff of
so interesting.
all others.
But that's something that's not talked about, right? It's like everyone knows and will agree and will have a conversation. Yeah, of course I hire for character.
Yeah.
But when you're creating a job description or asking for references of talent, the first thing you look at is like, okay, what's their experience? Where have they worked? Where are they now? What skills do they have? You don't like... And it's very difficult to measure someone's character on a LinkedIn profile, right? I mean, apart from their posts and how they engage, if you can read through those lines, I don't know, but it's very difficult to do, right?
I think it needs to come from both sides, to be honest. I think it's extremely difficult for you to go and identify that character just like in a one-off interview.
Yeah.
I think the character will need to come from the other person as well, right? In terms of how they follow up, what they do, how persistent are they, how they engage. But... which I find a lot of people don't do, you need to be open enough,
accessible,
to talk to enough of those people. Because I have a lot of people, even on our team, like senior people, like someone pings them on LinkedIn and like they either don't reply or reply and just never meet that person. I actually waste a lot of time talking to those people, but sometimes it pays off, and when it does, it's much bigger.
But I believe that entirely. I think you're only as good as your network a lot of the time, right? You're only as good as your accessibility and your access to specific things, be it money, be it talent, be it kind of, whatever it is. But but it's not something that anybody is truly using as one of their kind of spearhead strategies to attract talent. They don't say, how do we attract character? How do we...
It's not proactive. Basically.
It's not a proactive thing. It's not part of the mix all the time. It's secondary, and it's one of the filtering mechanisms, but it's not something that you're searching for.
We started like that. Actually, funny, I haven't thought of it that way, but like the first 4 people we hired were like 4 Danish engineers that we brought into Dubai and got an apartment, and they worked here. And our lead Android developer at the time was one of those guys who had never developed Android before.
Wow.
So basically we got him and he was doing backend. He's like, I want to be the Android guy. I'm like, he was probably one of the smartest people I've met. I'm like, okay, you got him. You're our Android developer. Go learn it and then come develop the app. In theory, we could have just went and hired that Android guy, which is easier and whatever. But yeah, we did it from the start. And most of the time it works, like when you go for character. Sometimes you misjudge characters, obviously. It's not like no one is perfect, but I think the risk is worth the reward when it works.
Super. I totally agree, and I think everybody that's ever worked with me and I've been successful with in any organization or even within Duck Life has been, if I think about everyone in the company, including Lauren, I mean, character has been by far the leading trait that I've found to be kind of the contributor to success in whatever it is that we're doing. So I completely agree with you. I'm excited to see how, on the back of this conversation, I might even change my approach because we're hiring and we're growing. So I'm trying to think, how do you attract character? And on that point, my realization is you try to build not only the right culture but the right brand to attract the right people. It filters out people who might not have the character that you're looking for.
100%. So I think brand culture and also probably the vision of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people get attracted to that.
Yeah. Super interesting. So we're 2021, where, the end of the first quarter, the world is very different than what it was, a year and a half ago, a year ago. And you've pivoted. You have enough, money in the bank, I think, for a while. Unless you're raising another round. But what's 2021, 2022 looking like for you guys as a business?
Yeah, so it's 2020. We realized it's not going to be a revenue year. Like, we realized this is not the year where you're going to show like 5x revenue growth and go out and. So we decided to really double and triple and quadruple down on the product side of things. So by end of the year, we had finished, 4 out of the 5 products we wanted to get out. And for us now, it's a question of business development. It's really taking these things that we've built, which to a large extent are on the SaaS side, and really rolling them out to key partners, both here in the Middle East as well as our European partners. So for us, I would say 2021, at least for sure, is more of a business development year in terms of signing these contracts, getting those people on board to act as the building blocks for 2022, which is basically more on the marketplace side and all that.
So really focusing on this new pivot, getting the key kind of initial players on board, and then setting yourself up to scale in 2022.
Exactly. So getting the traction, getting the foundation ready from a user base, from a supply base, from a revenue, even contracts at least.
Yeah. To close, I want to make it a bit more. I want to ask you kind of a personal question.
DUCKit.
Okay with it. DUCKit. Fuck it. You're a guy who's pivoted personally. You had the corporate finance career, I think. Pivoted, became a startupper. You've been in the startup journey for a while. You've been building your family at the same time. You built a business that's remote. I look at what you're doing and how you've been doing, and I can't help but think about the personal kind of weight of doing all that. And I look at you because I look at myself the same way I look at you. Like, oh shit, this guy's living something very similar to me. And one thing that you've done for me, and I don't want to promote or give a shout out embarrassingly to anybody, but you've basically introduced me to a way for me to deal with my own mental health too. And I know that mental health is something that literally everybody lives with.
Yeah.
And for me, it's been, I've had a few doctors or people that I spoke to in the past, but you connected me to someone that's actually really helped me. And it's really helped me manage all the stresses and the weight that I put on myself as a father, as a husband, as an entrepreneur, as a son, as a brother, whatever, right? So it's really helped me. And I wanted to kind of ask you your perspective on what is the role of a leader, be it in family or in business, to put emphasis, weight, and time into mental health, especially given everything that's been happening the last couple of years. How do you frame that, and how important is that in what you do?
Yeah, I think it's super important. I mean, for us at Seez, in early 2020, we decided to bring a therapist as part of the offering that we have. So as part of the perks. So we have a therapist on board, which you met, and people can book time with her as often as they like and whenever they like. And for us, we have a few team members that have some different, mental health struggles. They tend to be the smartest, sharpest people as well. And 2020 hit, and we realized, everybody's going through something like, generational, like it's not normal. So we brought that help in, and it's been incredible. I mean, everybody who used it on the team loved it. And I think from my personal thinking, I haven't tried that before. And what I learned is you don't need to have mental health issues to benefit tremendously from talking to a therapist, right? Like everybody's stressed, everybody has some anxiety, everybody's worried, everybody's scared, everybody's all of these things. And really finding a better way to deal with all of that is key, because it grounds you, it gives you the power and the the persistence to keep going with a lot of these things. So it's been massive help for me personally, for Seez. And I honestly think, after, digging deeper into that, we're doing a lot more at Seez with it now. We're doing some strength finder programs to understand people's strengths and weaknesses and how to focus on what and double down on what and all that. And I also realized, everybody has issues. It's a question of what are the issues and how do these issues map with strength? Because I realized also some types of strength, like overachiever and whatever, come with their own set of issues, right?
Yeah, of course.
And people usually just go with the strength and say, he's like, if you look at someone like Steve Jobs or Michael Jordan or whatever, if you watch this Last Dance, those people had massive issues, but they had amazing strength as well. So really getting that help to also talk about the issues is important.
But why is that your job? Like, as an employer, why do you? So I admire and I completely agree with what you're doing. What is the realization to make it a part of your corporate responsibility?
Because you want people to be happy, you want them to be productive, and you want them to be healthy, right? Like a lot of companies give yoga and gym memberships and whatever. Not everybody likes yoga, everybody has some sort of mental strain. And it just, in a way, it shows that you care about the people as people, and you're not just giving random perks for the sake of perks. It means you care about the individual at a deeper level. And you end up having some really honest team conversations. We have some joint stuff, and really, a big chunk of our team are from Lebanon, and there was the bomb in Lebanon, course, and that was dramatic. And so really it shows a different side of the company and you, which is real. You shouldn't be faking that side.
Of course.
But then it helps people. And at the end of the day, if you care about your team, you want to help them. And it's one of the areas that genuinely helps. It's, beyond ping pong tables and beanbags. It's really real,
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe I should do more than just put ducks in the office.
I'm looking around. They want to say ducks. I just went for ping pong.
Okay, cool. Tarek, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking 3 COVID tests.
Here you go. You owe me 3 COVID tests.
It's really a pleasure seeing you in the flesh. It's been a long time. Thank
Likewise.
you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun.
Thank you.
All right.